Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on sustainability. As we've just opened the webinar to our attendees, please allow a couple of just a minute or so for all of the attendees to be able to log in, and then we shall start with our webinar. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adonis Pigasiou, and I'm the Academic Director of EIMF. Welcome to one more of EIMF's webinars. This time we will be dealing with sustainability issues. We're very happy to have with us an established professional that deals with such issues and stakeholder engagement, Irini Lugaidou. I will let Irini introduce herself in a bit. Just let me tell you that today's webinar will touch on issues of sustainability. It will offer an overview of the issue. It will touch upon why it is so important that we acknowledge and that we incorporate sustainability issues in our business strategy. We will look at trends that are currently prevailing at the global level that are also related with regulation, and also attempt to offer some guidance on how one can better report sustainability and indicators that are used. But I mean, Irini is the expert. I will allow her to go into more detail. I will pass the floor to her. Irini, if you could just please introduce yourself for a minute or so and what you do, your business practice, and then we can go on with the webinar today. For questions and answers, please feel free to note them down in the chat box, and I will make sure that these are then dealt with once the presentation has finished. Thank you all very much. Irini?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Adonis, for the introduction. As you said before we start, I would like to say a few words about who we are, what we do, but most importantly, why we do it. Grow Sustainability Consulting was founded with the vision of contributing in the creation of a just and sustainable world through purpose-led mobilization of resources. Our mission is to help organizations grow in a sustainable way through positive social and environmental impact. Our goal is to deliver sustainability expertise that assists organizations to improve their performance through the development and implementation of impactful sustainability strategies, thus creating added value both for the organizations that employ our services, but also the society at large. We're very passionate about tackling the challenges facing society today, and we know that no single individual, organization, or even sector can do it alone. We work with diverse organizations that are unified in their desire to create value and deliver change. We truly believe in the power of mobilizing resources for the greater good and helping those with resources manage them in a way that has a positive environmental and social impact, but is also sustainable enough to ensure that they can do it over and over again over time. Now, the concept of sustainability is based on three main pillars: profit, planet, and people. Some people are more familiar with the term corporate social responsibility, but that only focuses on the social aspect of things and ignores the importance of environmental management and protection. And as you know, climate change is now one of the biggest societal threats that we urgently need to address. Also, financial prosperity allows us to invest in research and the technology to make the necessary changes to preserve the environment and take further action that will ensure the sustainability of our planet and society as a whole. So all three pillars are equally important. Another term now used to describe corporate responsibility is ESG, which means environment, society, and governance. An organization's sustainable development depends on many factors, such as its sensitivity in environmental issues, its social contribution, as well as its governance policies. And governance is equally important if corporations are to be held accountable and responsible for their actions. And there is now a clear link between a company's financial performance and its ESG strategy, And it's important to understand how all these factors affect an organization and its impact, and use clear KPIs that provide the metrics to facilitate decision-making. That is why a lot of investment firms and banks rely on these metrics and ratings to decide whether to invest in a company. Companies that respond well to these metrics are more likely to perform well financially, and this is a huge trend worldwide. That's why we see green bonds gaining ground. Now, the purpose of an organization is usually a peripheral activity and not seen as a necessity, unfortunately. But when purpose is placed at the heart of business strategy and leadership commits to sustainable development, then not only is the organization more fit to deal with a rapidly changing environment, but it also responds to stakeholders' needs and expectations. Sustainability is more than just making a donation or planting trees. It's about making real contributions to your community, even if no one is watching. So it's about bridging the gap between profit and purpose. Now, 73% of European businesses agree that ignoring sustainability would affect their company's ability to create long-term value, a clear signal that the issue is rising up the business agenda. Driven by a developing societal awareness, companies face growing demands to conduct their business ethically and sustainably. And as we go through one of the worst global crises, organizations are facing increased pressures to be sustainable and responsible, whether that's from clients, employees, regulatory bodies, shareholders, or other relevant stakeholders. Now, these have been articulated in international documents and agreements, of which the UN Sustainable Development Goals have gained particular prominence. These are 17 goals to, among others, end poverty, fight inequality, improve people's health and well-being, and tackle climate change by 2030. Now, if we stand a chance of these goals being met in less than 10 years, governments, corporations, and civil society need to work together collectively and intensely. So to keep up with these ever-increasing demands, it's not enough for companies to just be aware of and express a commitment to sustainability. What was good enough yesterday is no longer sufficient today. Value is no longer just defined in financial terms, but it is also measured by positive and sustainable societal impact through specific international standards, such as the Global Reporting Initiative. GRI has developed a clear set of rules on how to disclose your company's non-financial performance. It's an independent international organization that has pioneered sustainability reporting since 1997. Today, more than 80% of corporations choose GRI as their reporting principle, so it represents the global best practice. GRI helps businesses and governments worldwide understand and communicate their impact on critical sustainability issues and enables real action to create social, environmental, and economic benefits for everyone. Now, these standards were developed with a multi-stakeholder approach and are rooted in the public interest. According to the GRI, before you develop a sustainability strategy, you must first conduct a stakeholder analysis and a materiality analysis. Stakeholder capitalism, a popular management theory in the 50s, which is based on the concept of creating shared value, not just for shareholders, but for all stakeholders, is making a comeback. Spurred by the alarming climate crisis and increasing social challenges, such as rising inequality, the movement is gaining a lot of support. And increasingly, there's a sense among business leaders that the prevailing ideology of putting shareholders above everyone else, which has reigned for the past 40 years, needs a serious update. But it's also left a path of environmental and social destruction for future generations to grapple with. Now, BlackRock's Larry Fink, the world's largest investor with $7 trillion in assets under management, in his annual letter to CEOs last year, placed long-term sustainability at the center of his investment approach. The World Economic Forum updated its Davos Manifesto for the first time since 1973 to more clearly state that businesses must be stewards for the environment, uphold human rights throughout their global supply chains, and pursue sustainable shareholder returns that don't sacrifice the future for the present. And last August, 181 multinational CEOs of the Business Roundtable revised their statement on the purpose of the corporation to explicitly move beyond shareholder primacy, a stance that they've held since 1997 to express a fundamental commitment to all our stakeholders. So changing the narrative from shareholder to stakeholder won't happen overnight, but we need to make room for the conversation. Our organizations and ultimately the planet depend on them. Like all change, the best place to start is locally, identifying opportunities and priorities in your own organization. Stakeholder capitalism can't succeed if shareholders don't see the value. In a stakeholder model, measurement must be a team effort. While the CFO bears central responsibility for delivering financial results to shareholders, he or she will need the support from the COO, the CMO, the CIO, and the CEO to articulate how all of this together working on ESG issues affects financial performance. But the best way to respond to stakeholders' needs is to engage in a dialogue with them. Stakeholder engagement is recognized as a fundamental accountability mechanism since it obliges an organization to involve stakeholders in identifying, understanding, and responding to sustainability issues and concerns, and to report, explain, and answer to stakeholders for decisions, actions, and performance. So through stakeholder engagement, an organization's material issues are highlighted. The central point of sustainable development is the materiality analysis process that is based on the principle of raising the material issues for each stakeholder group. Now, material issues are those that reflect significant economic, environmental, and social effects of the organization. More simply put, it's analyzing what matters and where it matters. So the identification of the material aspects depends on an assessment of the impacts resulting from the organization's activities. And these impacts might be identified inside or outside of the organization's direct control. Now, GRI categorizes material issues and discloses on these 6 main sustainability pillars: economic and governance, labor practices and decent work, human rights, marketplace issues, society, and last but not least, the environment. So let's look at them one by one by starting with governance. So good governance is fundamentally about improving transparency and accountability within existing systems. Therefore, in order for a company to have good governance, it must first, of course, fully comply or even exceed the requirements of applicable legislation and the regulations governing its operation. It must often adopt or implement a standard, a tool related to these issues, such as various ISO certifications. Now, in this context is, of course, GDPR, which secures customer consent, restrictions on the collection, retention, and use of data, adequate security in their storage, etc. We also look at the organization's code of ethics and conduct, which must be based on the company's business values and principles. These ultimately determine the obligations and behavior of our employees. Particular emphasis is placed on the principles of accountability, as I said before, integrity and transparency, and the effectiveness of the company's control function, such as internal audit. There must, of course, be applied reporting policies and procedures with regards to whistleblowing for concerns and incidents, complaint management policies, anti-bribery, conflict of interest, etc. Now, in this section, we also look at the organization's financial performance and market presence, but also the indirect economic impacts it has on the local community, for example, through local employment or supporting local producers, etc. And obviously the company's risk management strategy. After all, sustainability is about managing risk, but in a responsible way. So the company must disclose any investments made based on a sustainable business strategy and model that benefits all stakeholders. Now, moving to HR and personnel issues, obviously we need to have clearly reported procedures which are communicated to all our employees on matters such as recruitment, promotions, enforcement of disciplinary sanctions, dispute resolution, etc. And we've all seen how important occupational health and safety is during COVID. Wellness at work is extremely important, especially with younger generations whose priorities have changed. A title and a good paycheck are no longer enough to attract good talent. Some companies are offering gym, entertainment, lunches, kids supervision, mental health support, especially during COVID, etc. Also, the roles and responsibilities of management, executives, and staff must be clear and well communicated, while there is a system for monitoring the performance, conduct, and practices of all personnel, wherever they are in the hierarchy, for example, through 360-degree evaluation systems. And now we're even seeing executive compensation linked to sustainability objectives. Another huge chapter under this pillar is also value chain management. It's extremely important that an organization, especially ones with large supply chains, align their culture and values with their external partners and suppliers. And we can do that by establishing a dialogue with them to understand their position on important issues such as sustainability. We have to make sure that there is an established and clear process for the initial selection and evaluation of our suppliers that takes into account their corporate behavior. It's not enough that we demonstrate responsibility in all aspects of our operation. Our partners must do too. They must follow decent work practices, fair treatment practices, such as prohibiting child labor. They do not commit human rights violations, such as human trafficking. So effective sustainability increasingly requires management up and down the value chain. And issues in one part of the value chain can impact others. That brings us to the third pillar, which is human rights. And under this pillar, we examine whether there are adequate diversity and inclusion strategies at all levels, board level, management level, employee level. We need to ensure that all employees are provided with equal opportunities for education, personal and professional development and improvement, regardless of their gender, age, nationality, and religion, and based on their individual needs, identified through defined channels of communication and dialogue between management and staff. We need to ensure that the organization provides a working environment free from all forms of discrimination and promotes the principle of equal pay for equal work. And that brings us to the fourth pillar, which is called marketplace. And under this pillar, we examine if the organization provides clear, sufficient, and useful information to customers about safe and environmentally sound use of products or services, as well as any other issues such as pricing, conditions, warranty, returns, customer rights, obligations, etc. We must ensure that there is a clear process for after-sales service, grievance management, dispute resolution. We systematically measure the degree of our customer satisfaction and make improvements if and when needed, and develop mechanisms and procedures for retaining our loyal customers, for example, through CRM programs, etc. Now, innovation and especially digital transformation has been extremely important in mitigating the negative effects of COVID on business. Some companies have even changed their whole business model to stay afloat. But those who change and adapt are the only ones to survive. So integrating innovation in your business strategy definitely strengthens competitiveness. And that leads us to the fifth pillar. Although social contribution is a bit trickier to define and measure, it has gained particular prominence worldwide during the pandemic, with campaigns such as Black Lives Matters, Amazon workers rising against poor labor practices during the first lockdown, and so on and so forth. But how can we define social contribution? We first need to identify the needs and expectations of the society in which we operate, as well as the effects our operations have on it and the environment, and then take into account these effects to find out ways in which to mitigate them in our strategic planning, as well as decisions for future investments. Then we need to engage in a constructive dialogue with representatives of the local community in which we operate through various communication channels to understand their priorities on important sustainability issues and CSR, but also the degree of their satisfaction with our performance in these. We then need to form collaborations with the local community. This could be NGOs, municipalities, educational institutions, medical centers, etc., in order to financially or otherwise contribute and support to the development of the local community. This could be through employment of local population, the development of infrastructure for the protection and promotion of the environment, the protection of heritage and culture, implementation of actions to support vulnerable population groups, the use of local producers, etc. And that brings us to the sixth pillar, the environment. And at this point, I would like to show you a small video that explains what the Paris Agreement is and where we stand with regards to the global regulatory framework on the environment. Just a minute. Okay, so moving forward to EU legislation, and more specifically the European Green Deal, sustainability disclosures and reporting criteria are expected to become stricter due to the catastrophic effects of climate change. At the moment, only public and large-sized companies are expected to disclose their non-financial performance, but this is soon expected to change. And this is an opportunity, because if a company wishes to stay ahead of their game, they must be proactive and not wait for sanctions to be imposed to get a start. Now, the EU's farm to fork strategy is an integral part of the EU Green Deal. Let's watch this short clip about it.
Which do you believe is the most important? To produce enough nutritious, affordable food for every person, or protect the future of our planet? We don't believe we should have to choose. As the European Green Deal sets out to make Europe the world's first climate-neutral continent, farm to fork is at its heart. Investing billions of euros into research and technologies, transforming how we produce, distribute, and consume our food for healthy people, healthy societies, and a healthy planet, and at the same time creating new opportunities for consumers, farmers, and the food industry. It's time to reshape tomorrow, to move from an ideal to a reality, from a way of eating to a way of life, from farm to fork. Do you have the appetite for change?
Now, according to scientists, we stand a better chance at achieving the EU Green Deal if we all limit animal intake rather than by limiting our air travel. So it's not enough that governments take bold measures or companies taking steps towards environmental protection, but the society as a whole has to help. It is about making collective and coordinated efforts.
Which do you
Sorry. This pandemic brought a lot of weaknesses of our systems to the surface. When everything stopped during the first lockdown, the planet finally got to breathe. COVID-19 has forced us to re-examine our food chains, our production methods, etc. So any corporation that belongs in this ecosystem has a responsibility to take action on at least some of these issues. Philanthropy is always good, but if we don't target the root of the problem and embed sustainable business practices throughout our business model, then we cannot be considered good corporate citizens. Now, following all of this detailed analysis, we reach the point where we formulate our ESG strategy. A good strategy provides the basis for all sound business decisions. It can build resilience, it can improve performance, and meet high-level strategic business objectives. The ESG strategy formulation includes specific goals on the material issues raised in the sustainability report. So when developing an ESG strategy, companies must consider many aspects, including their scale, as well as the industry and the markets in which they operate. There is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to ESG policy, and it takes careful consideration and planning by an expert. But the ESG strategy will help you define what sustainability means to your organization today and in the long term. It will convert your sustainability ambition into a tailor-made sustainability strategy that aligns your day-to-day business reality. And it will integrate your CSR identity, if you like, in sustainable corporate behavior that stretches into all operational disciplines, transforming your organization into a decent corporate citizen. Achieving your strategic goals requires clear and meaningful plans and pathways for action, structured action and management plans that will guide your progress, assist on its implementation, and report on the results of the actions agreed on. And finally, metrics. Sustainability reporting is telling your sustainability story in a way that can be heard by company leadership, investors, owners, customers, and all stakeholders. So clear KPIs need to be defined that will enable you to measure the effectiveness of your social impact strategy, and if needed, tweak them accordingly in case something is not working that well. So there is a mass of sustainability information out there. You need to cut through the clutter to focus on the right things in the right order with the right level of ambition to allow you to effectively and simply identify, prioritize, manage, and communicate your sustainability performance. Now, we have a methodology in place for sustainability integration, but sustainability is an organizational change issue. You can have the best plan in the world for your sustainability, but it can still fail if it's not effectively embedded into business priorities, processes, rewards, and culture. Many companies don't have a dedicated sustainability department with a chief sustainability officer, and one is not always necessary, but a team whose members come from all departments of the organization is. Sustainability needs to start being embedded in job descriptions, and commitment from the top is a must if the working group is to devote time and effort in achieving sustainable development goals. Sometimes introducing incentives for employee contribution towards this is a good way to ensure commitment. Now, sustainability is sometimes seen as a cost rather than a value creator. However, it can definitely drive innovation, brand differentiation, and win business. If recognized as an organic business tool, it can become a long-term success factor and a strong competitive advantage. In the short term, you will benefit from enhancement of your sustainability credentials, meeting and moving ahead of pressures from regulators and stakeholders, and finding efficiency-based cost savings too, as well as increasing profit. Long-term benefits include enhanced relations with stakeholders, such as higher customer satisfaction, investor support, and better employee relations. It motivates your personnel to know that they are actively being involved in a higher purpose more than their employer's profitability. It lowers risks in your value chain. It helps build a positive image of your company and enhances its reputation. It creates trusted a brand, and in some cases even changes perceptions of who the company is and what they care about. And at the end of the day, knowing you're doing the right thing for your children and grandchildren. Now, according to the World Happiness Report, happiness has become a measure of a nation's progress, which is more important than its gross domestic product, the GDP. In 2016, the United Arab Emirates launched the National Program for Happiness and Well-being, aiming to make the UAE among the happiest 5 countries in the world. The phrase gross national happiness was first coined by the 4th King of Bhutan in 1972. And happiness is very closely related to sustainable development goals. Therefore, governments need to move away from traditional methods of measuring growth and development and move towards well-being and happiness measures. We are now faced with a unique opportunity to restart after the pandemic and build back better, because companies can only flourish in a healthy society, not just free of disease, but based on healthy values, healthy structures, processes, and systems in all sectors and at all levels. And I would like to close my presentation with this quote: "The days are gone when being aware of sustainability issues was enough. Today, we must translate awareness into actions, use sustainability as a competitive advantage, and reflect on the wider purpose of our business." Thank you. I'm very happy to answer any questions that our viewers have. You're
Okay.
on mute.
Now you can hear me. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We are open to Q&As. I've already made a number of comments that I would like to discuss further, but let's give a chance to the attendees first. And we have a first question from Dimitris. Many benefits are hard to quantify at the company level. Still, there are costs to the company, and I was wondering if companies have been able to identify some of these benefits. I assume identify them in a tangible manner. I mean, because and not just an abstract idea. So that's a first question.
Yes, obviously, environmental benefits are more easier to quantify and to measure the benefit for the company. As I said, social contribution is a little bit trickier to define and to measure. But, you know, as I said, it's not enough just to look at the bottom line, but the whole journey of a company to sustainability and creating this commitment from employees is also very important. And this can be quantified through questionnaires from the company towards employees to see if they're happy in their position, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just a matter of the bottom line. There are other metrics and KPIs that can be put in effect.
You know, working on what Dimitris asked, I have a question myself that I find very challenging. So we have the KPIs, we have the Global Reporting Initiative, which is, as you said, best practice. So no one is actually legally obliged in any way to follow the Global Reporting Initiative, although it's there as a best practice and many companies do follow it. So I was wondering, in case some firms don't actually follow that initiative, follow something else, so they do some ad hoc, I don't know, calculations, and they publish some sort of ESG indices of their own. How easy is it to carry out a comparative analysis between firms, know which firms actually do engage in ESG, that their metrics are credible in a way? How can we overcome this obstacle of being able to carry out comparative analysis in an effective manner? And also, the other thing I would like to ask, and now I forgot actually what was the second point, to be honest. I will come back though. I'll give you a chance.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I will try to answer your first question until you remember the second part of it. So working groups globally are trying to come up with common reporting standards, very similar to financial reporting, so that this comparison, as you said, is made easier. But at the moment, there is also cross-referencing between the various reporting standards. For example, even if an organization follows the GRI, they can still refer to the ISO 26000, which is the ISO certification for sustainability in the report. They can also cross-reference the SDGs. So there is an interlink between all the various standards. And I think this is also how can I say, it's encouraged.
Okay. So there is the intention is to reach a stage where we have global standards like in accounting. So that's very, because it's related to the question also that we have from our reporting practices in the EU, the USA, Asia, similar. We are they are converging, I assume, yes, and at some point we have global standards. Is there uniformity? Not yet. There are best practices. And how can investors, shareholders be educated to push for this? I would also add stakeholders in more general term. So how can investors, shareholders, stakeholders be educated to push for this?
First of all, I'd like to say that most of this wave, as we say, the trend is essentially being driven by customers and consumers, and because of this, organizations are being forced to follow. The same with governments. So there is this wave, and I hope it continues. And a lot of companies, both in Cyprus and abroad, can catch up and start getting into this field more deeply. And this is why we have seminars such as the one today to discuss about these new practices, these new principles, and inform people both from the corporate world, or whether they're working for an NGO or from the governmental sector, etc. So abroad, things are moving very, very quickly. I mean, we're studying new disciplines, new practices every day.
Okay, and I remember the second part of my question. Now, this has, I was wondering if, and I will sort of allow you to expand on the issue of greenwashing through my question. Does the lack of uniformity in indices allow for firms to carry out this, what is known as greenwashing? And you kind of expand a bit on the issue, if you know, I mean, if you are in a position to say about what do we mean by greenwashing?
Yes, definitely. I think that the lack of universal standards helps with greenwashing. Greenwashing is when a company claims that they are responsible or sustainable when in fact they're not really. So if we do come up with a globally unified reporting framework, I think this will definitely help with the problem of greenwashing.
Yes. So, and another question that is linked with that from our audience is, do de facto, do we have like lobby groups that play now the role of monitoring whether or not companies are carrying out the greenwashing? I mean, do we have not lobby groups, like environmental activists, for example, Greenpeace, that they come in and they check on companies whether they are actually following ESG practices, whether they are greenwashing or not? Do we have such, do activists have such a role to play until we have come with?
Yes, I think there have been cases where there have been civil society groups rising against companies that were greenwashing and weren't. I mean, I mentioned an example before with Amazon workers rising during the first lockdown about poor labor practices. There are other cases. I mean, for example, the Fashion Week in Copenhagen was cancelled because there were, environmental groups rising against it, so they had to cancel it. So there is a lot of movement around this, and I'm very happy that that is the case. And I hope that we have more and more conversations on the issue of sustainability so that these ideas and new practices are discussed and move further.
Okay. I'll go back to our attendees again. We have a question from Luis, and then I go to the question from Dimitris. According to your experience, to which extent companies who are already actualizing a sustainability process, procedures, reports, and so on, are also open to invest in aligning their people's mindset to go through that change? And through their people's mindset, I assume they are employees. I'm not sure if it also includes the wider and society within which they operate.
Yeah, that is one of the purposes of our training programs to employees, to educate them on the basic principles of sustainability so that they're then able to recognize the value of sustainability, but also giving them incentives to take part in sustainability initiatives. There are a lot of ways to do that. Even a questionnaire about sustainability can trigger, and make them think, what could I be doing about this subject? Am I doing enough on this subject? So there are a lot of ways to engage employees. And
are companies actually willing to pay for training their employees on such issues from your experience up to now? Do you see that?
Yes, definitely.
Yes,
Definitely.
change
Yes.
in an approach. Yes, that's good. That's encouraging. Yes, and also another question is before we go to another question, because you asked, you referred to incentives given to employees.
Yes, it could be, for example, an award ceremony to recognize somebody's input in the sustainability reporting group, or for volunteering for a number of hours to an NGO, or for organizing a recycling initiative.
Okay,
just
that's clear. That's clear.
Everyday initiatives.
And how about giving incentives to companies to engage? The state or the government or the local or the state authorities. I don't know. Do you think that there are enough incentives in?
No, I don't think that there are enough incentives, and there could definitely be more. I mean, previously when the subject of sustainability wasn't so widespread, and we were talking about corporate social responsibility, and companies thought it was just making a donation to a non-profit, the only incentive was that the donation would be tax exempt. I think, thankfully, we've moved a lot since then. And I'm hoping that more incentives will be given by the government for more companies to become good corporate citizens and act responsibly.
This is also linked with what Dimitris comments here, the situation with high pollution countries, high pollution industries. Is there any way to force them to change?
Yes, definitely a carbon tax would help in this direction. And I know that a lot of discussions are being made around a carbon tax. And we hope that these discussions will progress swiftly, and carbon tax can finally be imposed on heavy carbon companies.
Yes. Now, another question from Mekti. Since GRI guidelines since compliance with these guidelines isn't mandatory to companies, it becomes pretty difficult to incorporate these sustainability norms, especially when you look at the side of investment, of the investment needed in order to carry out this compliance. If we take industrial activities into account, the last thing they would account for would be sustainability and noxious gases and mitigation. So yes, she's in line with the approach that we should offer greater incentives. That's
Definitely.
but
Completely agree.
but mentioning the carbon tax, I think that's a valid point as well. The issue there, I would say, it will be, if the EU applies such a carbon tax first, then I would see a lot of industries, factories being transferred to other countries outside the EU where they don't have a carbon tax. They're a race to the bottom, and having
Yes.
other countries relaxing their regulation in order to attract this.
It's not that easy.
Global
Yes,
practice.
definitely.
We need global.
And there are a lot of other
commitment.
issues at stake when discussing a carbon tax. I mean, commercial relations with big markets such as China, India, who are very heavy on producing steel and concrete and things like that. So it's not that easy. I don't think it's a decision to be taken lightly.
Yes. No, a possible approach, I don't know, just thinking out loud now, was to allow to import goods in the EU, for example, speaking as a EU citizen, allow to import goods that are produced in factories that have low carbon emissions, or they are, they follow some sort of indicators that verify their commitment to ESG standards. Let's see now if we have another question. I think we've covered all of them, around 10 questions. Okay. I hope I did not leave anything unanswered. So we have some time for another question, and I would take the advantage of being the host, and I would like to ask. Okay, before that, we have a question. You're talking about financial companies. Are there any ideas by informing and educating everyday people um, uh, with their culture and economic differences? Sorry. For their cultural and economic differences, maybe more people and environment oriented than economically. So it's education.
You mean for individuals, not corporations?
Yes.
If I understand correctly?
Yes.
Yes, of course. And I mean, through our social media as a company, we try to educate individuals as well on how they can be more responsible in their day-to-day lives with very simple tips and advice. So it's not, as I said, it's not just about governments making regulations and rules. It's not just enough for companies to follow these rules and go beyond regulatory compliance, but also the society as a whole. I mean, all three sections have to work together collectively to achieve best results.
Okay, and one last question, because we're talking to possibly people, most of our attendees come from the financial services, which are not considered to be heavy industry. They do not, they're not in the emission and they don't create pollution through their activities, at least not to an extent like chemicals or heavy manufacturing. So just give us an idea of how these institutions, financial institutions, can contribute to this cause.
Well, it's about looking internally first before looking at external factors that could affect the society. So because financial institutions are usually very big companies that employ a lot of employees. So there's a lot to do internally before they start their external actions. And that's my best advice to financial institutions, to first look what they can change internally to become responsible and sustainable, and then look at external factors.
Save energy, for example, or paper waste and waste management.
For example, wellness programs for their employees, fair treatment. I mean, we've mentioned them in the presentation beforehand. There's a lot to do internally before looking at outside factors.
I would just add, for example, another perspective here, green finance, where they actually give their loans. having high standards regarding to which people they engage in. I mean, why give a loan to a company that does not follow sustainability rules and sustainable practices? So that's another way of actually contributing.
Definitely.
Yes, promoting green bonds, all this green financing, sustainable financing. Yes, these are also very important issues for the financial institutions, and also internally, what you said, making sure that they do what is best possible first internally in order to contribute to this cause. Irene, I think we are running out of time, and we have answered all questions. Apologies, I need to see once again. Great. Yes, we have no pending questions. So I would like to take again this chance and thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, for covering such a topical issue that's, it's continuously evolving issue. So you need to be up to date in order to speak about this. And we are very grateful that you offered us this very insightful presentation on the topic. I would like also to thank our attendees for staying with us. I mean, almost none left since the beginning of the seminar, and this is it shows that you managed to keep them engaged, and we're very happy for that. EIMF will be offering programs in the near future relating to sustainable finance, and sustainability, green finance, and all relevant issues. So I hope that we shall get a chance to see our attendees in one of our future seminars. Irene, thank you again very much. Enjoy your afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again. All the best.
Have a nice afternoon.
Same to you. Bye-bye.